the idea of doing a strategy behind real estate is kind of sexy, and it really is a great way to get started. But actually, if you want to know the full journey of real estate, a lot more growth will come from just making sure you get a good location, making sure you get into a good market, and holding on over time. Welcome to the Urban Property Investor. I'm your host, Sam Saggers, here to help you crack the code of real estate wealth. Today's show, we're going to dig into creating your own equity. Yes, watering your own garden. How do we create equity from real estate investments? What are some of the strategies behind equity creation? So we're going to dig into that. We'll try and cover off a couple by the end of the show. Not sure we can nail all of them. There's a fair few ways to extract equity out of real estate investments, but it is pretty popular. So let's dig into it. Sometimes with real estate, certainly how you buy property plays a part on how your investment recycling works, your return on investment. So I'm excited for today's show. Of course, welcome back, regulars. You know the drill. Play the program in double speed. Get your life back. And of course, all the episodes I've done are lessons on real estate. So feel free to dart about, go back in time, find a show that maybe tickles your fancy, and listen away. But hey, my world is good. I am looking to go to Sicily. Yes, I've heard Sicily is the place to be. So if anyone's been to Sicily, if you've got any travel tips, let me know. But other than that, life is good. But let's get into today's show, creating your own equity. Equity, of course, is that little concept of your real estate going up in value. The investment you have acquired creates a level of performance, and that performance is turned into equity. Obviously, if you buy a property for $700,000 and it becomes $900,000 in the middle, you've got a concept known as equity. You can extract a proportion of that equity, and if you've got the servicing capability and the right structures set up, you can go again and buy more real estate. So when you go shopping for real estate, there are some ways to actually get growth out of the way you buy real estate, the strategy you used to buy real estate. Now, many people would have heard me talk about my Forex growth plan over the years. And really, my Forex growth plan is deal growth, market growth, location growth, and behavioral growth. Now, when it comes to deal growth, it's really the strategy you are using to buy the real estate. It's really the science behind deal growth. And of course, deal growth pertains to using other people's time, things like pre-construction, delaying a settlement, land banking, and activating land later in the piece. It pertains to using other people's money, getting a discount, using the vendor's money. It pertains to using other people's designs, building for profit, knockdown rebuilds. It pertains to amalgamations through other people's design work. You can get developers to pay for designs. You can get builders to pay for designs and leverage off that without having to start from scratch. And of course, the Forex growth plan deal growth, which is just using a strategy to buy real estate, is also linked to using other people's relationships. And of course, that's where you can use joint ventures and develop armchair developing. So really, the idea of doing a strategy behind real estate is kind of sexy, and it really is a great way to get started. But actually, if you want to know the full journey of real estate, a lot more growth will come from just making sure you get a good location, making sure you get into a good market, and holding on over time. That's the reality. The reality of time, what we can achieve in a cycle, is exciting. And so, though it's important to get deal growth through a strategy, it only plays around a 10% component, or it adds a 10% component of the overall strategy of watching real estate double in value. Now, it is also important to understand that when you apply strategies to real estate, you want to understand the life cycle theory of real estate, property life cycle theory. So there are a couple of points you can add value to real estate. Obviously, in the beginning, when a property is brand new, you can add value to real estate using pre-construction off the plan. You can add value to real estate by knockdown rebuilding or building. You can develop real estate from the get-go, basically create a whole new title for real estate. You can subdivide, amalgamate, or you could simply just use the gift of the gab and get yourself a bit of a discount from a distressed seller. All of that is generally done at the introduction phase of property investment. As a property matures, it ages, as it starts to go into decline, some properties are really seen as very unsafe by the marketplace. They've lost their attractiveness, they've lost their appeal. Because they've lost their appeal, usually you can get a better price, and because you're driving a bit of a discount on the decline of a property, it lends itself to the ability to do a renovation on the property. And so, two ends of the spectrum, you've got add value strategies on brand new real estate, and you've got add value strategies and accelerator strategies on much older real estate. And so really, when it comes to buying property, there's no right or wrong. There's just strategies available. Obviously, the add value strategies around building and developing and pre-construction off the plan, they pertain to what is known as buy, depreciate, rent, recycle. And the strategy in relation to renovation relates to buy, renovate, rent, recycle. Recycle that equity is what is being referred to. So it's important to understand, if we're going to create our own equity and we're going to use a buying strategy to buy real estate, there are strategies available which work in the marketplace for both new real estate and also the second-hand real estate marketplace. Obviously, no matter what we do, the most important principle is making sure that we are buying an investment-grade piece of real estate. Obviously, sometimes when you're buying an investment-grade property, you're better off actually paying market value, even overpaying for a property, and not creating any form of add value equity creation in the beginning if it's about getting that gold nugget, just amazing piece of property. And of course, it's very difficult to get a huge discount on the most premier property in the street or in the best location going around because the seller usually has the upper hand. So it's not the end of the world if you don't add value to real estate in the beginning, but it is very handy if you add real estate or if you can add value to real estate in the beginning. And of course, if you think about what makes up an investment grade property, it's the property in the right cycle, it's the right economic growth, the right city fundamentals, the right neighborhood fundamentals, the right infrastructure for the real estate and for the people who live in the real estate, the right agent of change, what's going on, what's driving the marketplace, the right level of owner-occupier activity in the neighborhood, market indicators, demographic indicators, the right mobility, the right owner-occupier appeal for the actual piece of property you're trying to pick up, what is built in within the purchase. We call that intrinsic value, the right level of future zoning or scarcity to create uplift on the real estate, the right land to asset ratios, free space ratio, the right design functionality, the right, obviously, holding cost structure behind the real estate from maintenance to capital costs, tax advantages, the right rental return. And of course, if you can get all that right and you can apply then an add value strategy, then you're well on your way to picking the right property to create capital growth from. So when I explain add value strategies, I like to use the concept, what is the highest and best use for property? And really the law of control. Can you control interest rates? The answer, of course, is no. Can you control GDP for the country? The answer is no. Can we as mere mortals control the inflation rate? No, we can't. So what can we control is really the quality conversation around investing in real estate. Well, we can control, for example, doing a renovation. That's in our control. Inflation, not in our control. Renovating, within our control. We could control doing our own development. It's in our control. It's got nothing to do with tax reforms on property. We could build a property. That's in our control as opposed to consumer confidence, which is not in our control. We could do pre-construction, use other people's time and buy a property off the plan. That's in our control. So all of the strategies of a deal or the way deal growth is structured is really applying a strategy to a deal that you like once you've ticked off whether it is an investment grade piece of real estate. So there are plenty of ways to obviously add value to real estate, from renovation, subdivision, developing, discounting, which is really the easiest form, just using the gift of the gab, time with off the plan, and building. And all of those strategies I've personally done, and personally at handover made an uplift of value anywhere from sort of circa 10 to 27% on my investment. But I like to frame adding value as around 10% of the total capability of a real estate to go on and double in value. The biggest driver of real estate will be the market. The second biggest driver is the location. The third biggest driver is the differentiators on the real estate that make it stand out in the marketplace itself. Things like its view lines, things like its positioning, how much sun it gets. All of that is really critical to the long-term success of real estate. Strategy is really your short-term burst of energy on the real estate. Strategy and doing a deal, it can make you 10%. It makes you feel good. You feel like you're heading in the right direction. It's a great, almost when it comes to, is my real estate good? It creates almost like a bias in your brain that, yes, it must be good because it's gone up in value. Now, again, you just want to make sure that when you buy real estate, it's that investment grade piece, because there is a thing called faux pas equity, i.e. a basically dud property goes up in value through a strategy, but then after it goes up in value through some sort of add value component, it really does not catch fire or is not responsive to the other three growth drivers. And of course, the other three growth drivers are the market's got to like it, it's got to be in a good location, and it's got to have some differentiators on the real estate to stand out in the marketplace. So let's focus on a couple today. I thought today we would drill down off the plan, renovation, and build for profit. So what is off the plan? Well, essentially it is just using other people's time. And of course, really all you're doing is putting down a minimal deposit of 5-10% and coming back 2-3 years later and settling the property that is being built for you by another party. And that other party, of course, is quite often a developer. Now, off the plan can be a great strategy to accelerate wealth. And again, there are some great off the plans that have made people a lot of money in the real estate marketplace. But because the real estate marketplace is saturated with properties which are market lemons, a lot of people end up in a position where they buy the wrong off the plan, and it ends up in a situation where they don't do very well out of the investment. And really, that is market lemon theory, the idea that sellers, vendors, developers really actually know, most people don't know what they're doing in property, and so just tailor and build investments and sell investments to people who don't know what they're doing. And so they design poor products, just really cheap and nasty properties, and people buy them and of course wake up going, why did I do this? But if you put yourself in a position to buy off the best architects, the best designers, the best in the class of property creation, it's kind of the opposite to market lemon theory. So what you're trying to do is put down a minimum deposit, put yourself in a position over that time of basically putting down your minimal deposit of 10%. You don't have a mortgage during that period of time. You can save, you can increase your buying power. You can put yourself in a position to be in the marketplace without the debt of the asset, without the burn of basically owning the real estate with a mortgage. So that's kind of the advantage of off the plan. It really is the idea of using a deposit and the idea of deposit power, the idea of creating a cash on cash return from the real estate, recycling equity, delaying a settlement for a long period of time, being sort of mortgage free for a period of time, and buying in areas that, and basically properties which are world-class. Best in class is really the best way to approach off the plan. And so the aim with the strategy of off the plan is obviously creating some mechanical equity. So typically, if you find the right deal, you can buy at an early stage within the sales process of that off the plan. And the early stage or pre-market, kind of around 30% of the apartment development or townhouse development might get sold. Generally, that's at a lower price than later releases. And so the best time to buy is early, and really why you get typically a better price early is the vendor is getting or using your sales to go and get a loan to build the development. So generally, developers in this day and age need about 30% of the development sold. And so they generally price to sell in that first 30%. So it's usually quite good pricing. Now, there's a midpoint for the development where around 70% of the stock is sold, and that's where you've got this kind of mid-range pricing. Prices might have gone up by 5% from early stage or pre-market. And then the final release, the prices will have gone up around by 10% from pre-market pricing. And so typically this is the highest price and often aimed at the most emotional, ill-informed market as well as the home buyer marketplace. So we can see over the course of the development going through its time cycle, you can often see prices rise, which obviously can help those who buy early in the piece and create with it a level of equity performance, as well as obviously time goes by, 2 years goes by. And of course, there are risks though when it comes to doing this strategy. Number one risk, which has been pretty relevant of recent times, is the project may not even get off the ground. And of course, because of high inflation rates, a lot of projects have been shelved, particularly in 2022 and 2023, where you just saw the tail end of really that COVID, everything's doubled in value, the development just becomes unfinancial. And so what happens in that situation, your opportunity cost of getting into the market sort of becomes, you obviously waste time, and we've only got so much time on this earth. Obviously, the risk are the finished product may be different to what you hoped, market lemon theory. So make sure you understand that one. The project timeline might get delayed, and that may mess with what you're doing in your life. You might be hanging out to settle the property and it's now 6 months late and you wanted to go on a world holiday. So it can meddle with your lifestyle, having something which you are committed to financially that is being built for you, whereby you have just put down a minimal deposit. So what are some elements of a good off-the-plan project? Well, firstly, it is design. Design is everything when it comes to apartments, and design really matters when it comes to the owner-occupier appeal for real estate investments. Design, the architecture, the floor plans, the floor plates, the outlook, the fixtures, the fittings, it's all got to be of decent quality, because again, the idea of pre-construction off the plan is not to buy something cheap and cheerful and hope for the best. It is to align yourself with other people's designs. And this is where the best architects come into play, the best design teams, and they bring the value for you. And so design logic is really, really important with property investment, with the strategy pre-construction off the plan. Now remember, there's 3 design logics: reflective design, which is just, does the market see themselves living in the property? There's behavioral design. Does the property provide a nice way of living, a nice lifestyle, a nice sense of home ownership? And you can see that quite often through things like what extra behaviors does the off-the-plan project bring to market. It could be like a nice swimming pool, or it could be a nice gymnasium, the behavior of going to the gym. And the final thing, which is really important with design, is the functionality of the pre-construction off-the-plan apartment. So where people go wrong is floor plans. They end up with irregular shape properties that do not ever grow in value. So it's pretty critical. And I always just say this, there's some great brands out there that do pre-construction real estate well. Stick to the best, proven track record, and make sure you know what you're doing when it comes to looking into some of the details around functional design. So here's an example of a pre-construction property which where you will hear functional, behavioral, and reflective design logic. As this property was bought off the plan, it went up in value, and now the local real estate agent is reselling it as an established property. But it's a really good ad because it explains just how nice the property is. Listen to how this ad is written. Designer, luxury, lifestyle with breathtaking city views. The city skyline creates an endless, uninterrupted, breathtaking backdrop for this stunning apartment in this luxurious milieu of John Wardell architects. Rising with sculptural poise from its Art Deco warehouse heritage, this dynamic home building with its 240 square meters of communal kitchen, fireside lounge, teppanyaki grill, and garden area is the magnificent city edge setting for its contemporary apartment. Now, probably didn't, read that very well, but what you saw there was your Art Deco warehouse heritage, like poised sculpture. So that's reflective. Like you can see how this ad's written. It's like, oh, I could live in an Art Deco warehouse heritage reflective sculptural. I can see myself there. And then you've got all the behavioral elements. The behavioral elements: fireside lounge, garden area, magnificent city edge setting, teppanyaki grill. That all of that is behavior. I could use that. I could see myself having a wine, having the behavior of a fireside lounge. And of course, when you go to, if you read the ad further, you can see that it says things like, when it's describing the apartment, a versatile dining room or home office adds desirable dimensions, complementing a beautiful bedroom, mirrored built-in wardrobes, sliding door to terrace, open plan living and dining, designer kitchen, showcasing high-end ASCO appliances. You can see there that it's talking about its functional design. So again, these are some of the critical things to consider when buying pre-construction off the plan. Obviously, the supply cycle is really, really important with off the plan. If you're buying in a high supply period, off the plan can be very, very volatile. Over the last couple of years, we're in a very low supply marketplace of new product being produced. So pre-construction off the plan generally is not impacted by thousands of other buildings all completing at once. So again, to do pre-construction as a strategy and add value strategy, you generally want to do it in a load supplied economy of real estate. And currently that's the case. Obviously, also there's always this kind of new versus old kind of rivalry in real estate. And really when it comes to pre-construction new real estate, really what you're looking for is urban rebirth locations. So what you're trying to do is actually go to older suburbs where there's a lot of history, there's a lot of charm in the suburb, but something's happened in that older suburb where one of the best plots of land, the best land available in the suburb, the older home is no longer viable for that beautiful piece of land. And what happens is you get this rebirth effect of the best land in the suburb becoming available for new construction. And so it becomes a moot point, new versus old, because really what you're doing is going to an old established suburb and just getting a new life cycle going in that old established suburb. Obviously, the price needs to reflect market value, and quite often the delta between brand new real estate and secondhand real estate needs to be considered. You don't want, obviously, the price to be too far apart. You want it to be a reasonable delta. Now, if you look at older secondhand properties, you've got to consider they may have a price, but they also need to factor in improvements to their look and feel. So you might have an old property, for example, that is 600 odd thousand, but actually if you were to renovate it, you would have to spend 150 grand. So 600,000 plus its need for renovation takes it to 750,000, or you could have a brand new property for $710,000. So you're trying to look for really the maths where effectively the unrenovated price versus the brand new price correlates, which I think is a really great way to analyze the feasibility for pre-construction. Obviously, I've alluded to it's all about other people's design. So good brands, great developer, builder, architect are really the key principles to consider. Obviously, also how the contract reads. Now, there's all sorts of contract law technical points with pre-construction real estate. As for most contracts, you need to have them reviewed. But really, the idea is time and equity return. Now, I always advise people, if you're going to do a 2-year pre-construction off the plan, obviously it's a nice qualified piece of real estate. You probably want to judge the real estate from the 2-year period through the off the plan, where you just get a free hit by putting your deposit down, which usually can actually pay an interest rate on your deposit. So your money's basically held in trust, an interest-bearing account. So it's no different to just leaving it in the bank. But when you settle, you probably want to give yourself a further 2 years, a real 2 years in the marketplace for that equity return to unfold. So I always say it's 2 years basically free ride of a deposit, and then 2 years as a real piece of real estate in the marketplace. Now, pre-construction off the plan, obviously if it's done at the same time as a heavy rising market can do amazing. And then you sort of go, well, the market took my real estate for a ride. The right real estate, though, you can get zero market growth and also zero market growth and get an uplift from the strategy pre-construction off the plan. And so I've got some great examples, for example, of people in 2015, and myself included, investors that bought in Brisbane. In 2015, there was absolutely zero growth in Brisbane. We bought pre-construction for $634,000. By 2018, basically 1 year after settlement, it was worth $813,000. That is strategy coming together, because the market did zero. We all know that. We know that the Brisbane market took off in really 2020 when rates dropped and everyone left other states because of the great digital migration. So I can see from past performance and evidence that strategy of pre-construction offer plan does not need market growth. However, and if I analyze that real estate that I put together, which got into the market at 634, by the end of 2018 was worth circa 813,000. I can see by the end of 2023, whereby the market went up extremely well in Brisbane, that $634,000 property ended up becoming a $1.5 million property. So we can see the market doing its thing, and we can see the clear differential of the real estate strategy at work, creating that sort of 10 or 15% growth rate. So obviously good design, great inclusions, bit of amenity, and really the final piece of the puzzle, if you ask me, is good pre-construction real estate has a third place. Third place is just a place nearby the apartment whereby it adds a lot of value to the real estate. And of course, the third place is quite often the park across the street or the cool little bar scene down the road. Like, people live in apartments for the neighborhood more so than just living in an apartment. And again, this is why some people buy pre-construction off the plan and don't do well, because it's just a market lemon apartment. And so obviously you want, a bit of thought process around what that looks like. So I recently bought pre-construction off the plan myself, and just to give you an idea, I put down a $75,000 deposit. I bought a $750,000 4-bedroom townhome. It took 2 years to build. On completion, it was worth $930,000. Now, my investment was $75,000 plus $30,000, which was kind of my stamp duty. So I was all in for $105,000, and what I got back at the end of that time frame was basically 165% return, which was a $175,000 uplift. So I used $105,000 to make $175,000. I still get to keep my 105, but I made it 175. And so the investment for me was, because there was no holding costs, was really simple: deposit plus stamps, and the return on that investment. Now, if we go to the next strategy, we can talk about renovation, which is a buy, renovate, rent, recycle equity strategy. And it's a great strategy. It's a great strategy. Now, in renovation, there are really two versions of renovation. There's cosmetic and there's structural. Now, structural renovations, in my mind, are best as principal place of resident upgrading. It's a really good upgrading strategy. Now, property investors sometimes don't consider that their own home is one of the best ways to create wealth. And quite often people stay in their own home for a long, long period of time because of the convenience of staying in your own home. But we often advise that people should consider upgrading their own home 3 to 4 times through their lifetime. And whilst owning that property, make sure that you upgrade it for the marketplace. Do a renovation on it, because you can obviously create a bit of a tidy profit. And because of the ownership structure of it being your own home, the capital gains tax ruling is beneficial for you. So you're basically upgrading your own home and eventually kind of selling it. So there's so many examples of great before and afters of members doing strategies like this in my world. And again, the uplifts can be really, really, really good, from buying a home as a PPR in 2021 for 2.6, doing $1 million renovation, 3 points, taking the property obviously in it to 3.6 and then selling it for 4.3. Obviously there's stamp duty in there and holding costs and things like that. But it's just a great way to push, extra wealth into your back pocket. And if you're going to live somewhere, why not go through that process of actually pushing the renovation envelope? So structural renovations obviously involve knocking out walls, replacing structural elements to a property, and really anything that becomes structural in this day and age or large scale needs plans, it needs permits, it needs council approval, it needs the right architects. It really is essentially development, and far cry from cosmetic renovation. And so we often advise, if you're going to do large scale renovations as a project, you either consider it as a development or align it to a PPR upgrade strategy, because quite often people who live in a PPR know the home very, very well and just can, by virtue of constantly living in the home, come up with really good formulas on how to make it better. They can see where the impositions or imperfections on the property actually are. So things to appreciate with structural renovation, generally there's no straightforward starting point. You can come up with some plans and so forth, but it's not like you're just got a title block of land and a home which basically you put this bit in before that bit, and it's just like a jigsaw puzzle. Renovations, as you've probably witnessed on the block and so forth, things are constantly needing to be adjusted. So budgets also quite often get blown out a little bit with renovation. Obviously there's funding options out there for renovation, but you've just got to be mindful, obviously, that if you buy, you've got to consider what that looks like for servicing. But for a lot of people, they self-fund renovations. And obviously things to appreciate: possible building code upgrades, cost blowouts, structural integrity, potential hazardous materials, and, making sure you get the right sort of layout that the market ultimately wants. So the idea of a large renovation is that you kind of put $1 in and you get sort of $3 back, and you typically eventually flip that house as part of your process. And that's why we often think it's pretty good as a PPR strategy. Do it over, renovate certain bits at a time and put up with the inconvenience of living in the home, or live in the home and move out and do a quick sort of 6-month structural change and then put the real estate on the marketplace. Cosmetic renovations obviously are not going to be as fruitful as a structural renovation. So for every dollar you put in, you might look to get sort of $2 back or even an uplift on the rent. Typically, basically cosmetic renovations can be handled by yourself at an armchair level. So you might get some help from some good set of tradies, and even your property manager to do some cosmetic armchair renovation concepts. Now, really, when I teach the Forex growth plan, I teach property growth or deal growth, location growth, market growth, behavioral growth. But ultimately, if you buy early, for example, in life cycle theory, you buy or build a home brand new, you do get the chance to renovate later in the piece, 20 years later. So there is a rebirth strategy built into your investment program. Now, again, I've bought real estate where I've used the add value strategy discount back in, say, '06. By 2011, I'd taken a $400,000 property to $500,000 by getting some location growth and some add value growth through just buying at a good price. Then by 2024, I've had to well, that properties that I bought in 2006 and, recycled money in 2011, it's now 2024. It's time for a rebirth for that property. So by doing a $60,000 cosmetic renovation on the property, that $400,000 property with a $60,000 renovation has gone from being a new property back in 2006 to a renovated property in 2024 and worth 1.1 million. So again, you can park renovations in your strategy. And you really don't want to renovate everything. There are a lot of duds out there. And again, it really comes back to what I was alluding to with what an investment grade property is. 75% of the real estate market, new and old, is rubbish. This is rubbish. This is houses that need to be demolished, environmental hazards, decomposing real estate, and dysfunctional floor plans that you could never renovate and actually fix. And really, when I look at, so many properties which are basically dysfunctional, they are absolute nightmares, particularly for those people who think they should buy it, hold it. They then don't renovate it. And then they think, well, I'll renovate it one day. It's got to be the right look and feel. It's got to be the right floor plan. And again, there is a cost to delaying the ultimate idea of renovation. How does the math work differently? Let's say you could do a $200,000 renovation on a perfectly good home, investment grade, today, and get 100 grand back or 200 grand back or whatever it may be on the renovation. That same renovation, if you delayed 15 years to do it and you applied a build inflation rate, which is higher than the normal inflation rate, it's usually about 5%. In 15 years' time, that $200,000 renovation you could do today is $415,000 when you apply inflation. So again, making sure you do not take on a dud, because I see it all the time. People buy a property with the concept that there is a future utility on renovating it, then they just sitting on a landmine, a ticking time bomb, because the future renovation cost on it is way too high. So you either get it right from the beginning or you're holding a market lemon. So there's some rule of thumbs, I guess, when it comes to budgeting for structural versus cosmetic. Full structural renovations could cost you up to 40% of the value of the property. So think about that. $1 million property, you would need $400,000 or 40% to structurally improve it. A cosmetic renovation, typically about 10%. So that $1 million property, you might spend 100 grand cosmetically getting it perfect. So I always teach a future capital cost rule. I used to teach the 10-30 rule, which is now, I call it now the 10-50 rule because of inflation. If you listen to podcasts from 4 years ago, I would refer to this as the 10-30 rule. Now I refer to it as the 10-50 rule. For every 10 years old a property is, you need about 50 grand to renovate it, albeit if it's new, you get 20 years grace before renovation obviously is even a concept. So no point in renovating a property that is that is, 5 years old. So if you were to examine, for example, a 1970s house, it probably is 5.5 decades old now. You're probably going to need about 250 grand to knock out walls, do what you need to do to redo a complete kitchen, brand new wet areas. It's work. And obviously there's a square meter rate that you can also use to consider renovation. I'm just giving you some ideas around feasibility. Renovations cosmetically can be anywhere from $2,000 to $7,000 a meter. So if you've got 100 square meters at $7,000, that's $700,000. So again, it depends on where your property is positioned, what kind of suburb it's in, and what the market expects as a good-looking property in that area. Now, one of the things you need to consider is the delayed concept of gentrification with renovation. And again, you might buy a very simple property, then 20 years later, it's in a very vogue, hip, yuppified suburb. The kitchen you've got in that property is not matching what the suburb is, or the profile of the humans in the suburb. So you're not generally replacing like for like. You are generally going through a bit of an upgrade. So let's talk about 10 steps to renovation. First of all, if you are going to renovate and you are trying to add value through the strategy of finding a property and adding value to it, you need to consider benchmarking. Now, benchmarking is just what are the properties like in the neighborhood? What are their age, location, condition, and size? What adjustments you need to make around what that is? And what are they selling for? And really, you can't renovate unless other people have pioneered what a renovated property looks like in your neighborhood. So you might find something for $1 million that you can do a $200,000 renovation, which is 1.2, but there's a lot of comparables of multiple properties selling in the same suburb for 1.5 that are renovated. So again, that's the concept, a key principle. And so you're benchmarking sales superior to you, adjusting for age, location, condition, and size. And you're also benchmarking what rents look like for renovated properties versus unrenovated, adjusting for age, location, condition, and size. So once you've sort of benchmarked, you obviously need to do a project feasibility and again, a cost versus revenue analysis, risk assessment, and you need to then factor in the concepts I've sort of talked about: structural, cosmetic, future capital costs, current renovation square meter rates. Obviously, you then set a budget with your goal, create a detailed plan. I tend to, when I've done renovations, use draftspeople, interior designers, just because I find, they're very experienced in obviously dimensions. They are masters of measurement, whereas I am not a master of measurement. I know what I want, but I'll then converse and pay for a proper detailed plan through generally an interior designer when I'm doing an interior renovation. Obviously, some properties need a permit if it's whether it's strata approval or whether it's council approval. And so just make sure that if you're planning on doing anything, you get a approval. And quite often, if you're going to do things that are structural in a strata scheme, you're going to need full bylaws to do things like that. Obviously, renovating rules, there are typically low return items, things like gutters, fencing, roof repairs, restumping, plumbing, wiring, all of those things, like they don't add value to the property. No one sees them. They're kind of like this hidden cost because they're hidden behind walls. So you want to create a project timeline, who does what and when, and you want to make sure that you organize. If you are going to be in charge of the project, you organize people in the right timeline, i.e., if you're going to put a kitchen into a property and remove an old kitchen, you may need to level the floor before you put the kitchen in. So you might need a floor leveling done. So, you might need a floorer before you actually bring the kitchen in. And again, this is the sort of, I guess, dance of renovating. You got to know when to bring people. Otherwise they come and go, I can't do it. And then, you need to get the floor leveler in and I'll come back. And then you've got holding costs. So you're delayed and your budget blows out. And generally you want to book tradespeople well in advance because they're busy. There's a skill shortage going on when it comes to tradies. So you've got to make sure you can line up your project team perfectly. So there's a bit of work there, which is can be all worth it if you can add value to the property. And I always say, know the 5 R's of renovation. You can replace things, repair things, rebuild things, retrofit things, or remodel. Replace things like replace items like appliances and flooring. Repairing like fixing like suitable fixtures and fittings, like then they can be reused. Rebuildings like gutting something and starting from scratch, or even building or adding on, outdoor space. Retrofitting is effectively upgrading older systems. That could be retrofitting wiring, retrofitting plumbing, and remodeling is really that design and layout concept. And so you've got to stick to that formula. And of course, know your numbers. You might need building design team to help come up with a plan. You might need engineering plans. You might need an interior design team. So again, renovation is a great way to add value to real estate. And yes, cosmetically, carpet, paint, blinds, curtains, flooring is usually like a $35,000 refresh. And refreshing and renovation, it can be two different real things. And there's nothing like just getting a win off a refresh, but not to be confused with renovation. Now, recycling your renovation costs can be a problem though with renovating. So let's, by way of example, talk about an $800,000 property. We've put a 20% deposit down. It's a $160,000 deposit. We've now secured the $800,000 property. We've got an LVR of 80%, so our debt is $640,000. If we did a $200,000 renovation, the capital costs plus the purchase price is now $1 million, so we're in it for $1 million. We've now outlaid $360,000, being our $160,000 deposit, plus a $200,000 capital improvement cost, which is $360,000 in total. And so if we got a new value on the real estate of, say, 1.1, which is taking the $1 million property to 1.1, which is a win. But the problem also is now at a 80% LVR of 1.1. We have to reborrow or we have to recycle our money out. So we have to go back to the bank and work out how to get our deposit plus our renovation out of the real estate. Now, assuming it's 1.1 at this point in time, that means at 80%, it's 880,000 less. Obviously, the original debt means we could recycle $240,000 out of the real estate, but equally, that means not all of our money came back out of the deal. Not all of our money came out of the deal. And so you've just got to be mindful with renovation that it can be capital intensive on your deposit power. And you don't want to obviously have your money stuck in a deal. And of course, even if you renovate and for whatever reason, the banks don't agree with your feasibility, your money can get sort of tied up in the renovation. And quite often that's where people end up selling a perfectly good property because they're stuck. They can't get their equity out and they've kind of overcapitalized. Obviously, just be aware of the cosmetic lipstick failure in real estate, the law of diminishing marginal return. And it's a theory of economics that basically kind of constitutes that at a certain point, a property can't be saved, basically. And you can paint it, you can put some new landscaping in, you can put new flooring in, new blinds. You can do all sorts of stuff. You can put a new bathroom in, but it's just not going to change the idea that really the property is at its end of its economic life. So just be really, really mindful about that. And also the concept known as IKEA bias, where we often place a higher value on things that we partially create ourselves. So people love renovating because of this concept that you're involved, you're doing something, it gives you meaning, it gives you purpose, gives you a buzz. It's something to do. It's fun. Some people love, the idea of renovating and going to Bunnings and being creative, and just make sure that creative fix is actually financially going to do something and not just be a theory of wasting money. Now, again, the point of no surplus productivity is a real thing. Like I've seen renovations of terrace houses, good suburbs, places like Newtown, sold for 1.7, purchase price 1.275, renovation costs plus stamp duty, plus sales costs, plus holding costs, plus deposit, equals a return on investment of 2%. By the time you do your total costs plus depositing, you're not getting a return on the investment. And you end up with a really beautiful property, but not something from an investment perspective that quite often dividends. And that's why I think sometimes renovation is a really good PPR upgrade strategy. But you can obviously do the refresh, the cosmetic refresh, kitchens, bathrooms, enhanced street appeal, flooring, lighting. It's a great way to push the value of real estate. And quite often you see the benefit in rents. Now, the final thing we're going to talk about as an add value strategy today is building for profit. Now, building for profit is where you take the land and you basically either knock down the existing structure as a knockdown rebuild and you rebuild a brand new structure, or even you can go to a brand new land subdivision and just build a house on it. Obviously, a build for profit allows you those two concepts, knock down, rebuild, or basically a first build process. And so there are some great examples, certainly, that I've put together over the years of homes getting huge uplift during weak marketplaces by taking high quality land and replacing existing homes on it with brand new homes, i.e. don't worry about a renovation, knock the thing down and go again, or finding really good land and building on it, whether it be in new communities or basically infill subdivisions. So generally the strategy with building is a couple of things. Firstly, if you've got a build or buy, rent, depreciate, rent, recycle model, which is really the model of new, then the advantage is property lifecycle theory determines that you've sort of got this 20-year time frame without needing to renovate. So your new property is also influenced by zoning of other new properties coming to market. So you kind of get this push-up effect of building inflation, i.e. you build a property in 2024, the same building for the same property in 2025 is 5% more. So if you can get into a zone where there's building activity going, the cost of building pushes up your value of real estate. So it's like a strategy kind of component. The other thing is land pricing increase as a component of as land disappears, it kind of goes up in value. And really this is a big component of the mechanical equity process of building. i.e. if you buy a property and you have neighboring properties that will be released in stages in a subdivision. Let's say you based your early stage investing on a $250,000 block of land for 400 square meters. It's very common that the next stage release for the same block of land will be 5 to 7% more. So your block of land that you paid $250, all of a sudden at the next stage becomes $262,000. And by the next stage, that $262,500 property becomes $278,000. Stage releasing on land is a great way to get an uplift from the strategy building for profit. Obviously, when it comes to building for profit, it's all about design fundamentals. You want to design a home that is all about considering who's living there, the streetscape, the contours, the drainage, local amenity, and the type of income profile for that neighborhood. And really what home buyers are looking for is great design and layouts, light interiors, functional floor plans, good environmental technology, and low maintenance upkeeps. And really the advantage over a build versus a renovation, they're both very similar to each other in some respects, but the advantage is really those solid starting points. You just knock and dump down, and really today builders have the design frameworks that most homes don't need to be custom. Renovations tend to be custom, whereas a brand new build can be out of the box, so to speak, which doesn't sound sexy, but it's just practical and feasible. And obviously, when you do a new build, you can negotiate favorable terms for yourself, like the builder pays rain delays, the builder pays for rocks, liquidated damages, homeowner warranty. You can get structural warranties on it, modern. And so obviously the idea is to walk away from that strategy with the concept of faster build time than a renovation, so less out of pocket costs. And you want to obviously use the idea of zoning, build inflation, and land going up during your process of building in the neighborhood, as long with design to extract that kind of profit out of the initial build phase of building for profit. And so there are three different angles on adding value to real estate from the get-go. Hope that kind of made some sense. There's some great ways to add value to real estate, put yourself in a winning position, push some value on the real estate before the market does. But don't underestimate. It all comes down to buying the right property. Personally, I find adding value to property, it's great clickbait online. It looks good. People love it because it's fast and it feels sexy. But ultimately, real wealth is delivered over the longer term. If you can apply all 4 of my investment strategies, deal growth, market growth, location growth, and behavioral growth or differentiated growth on real estate, you're going to have the complete package. The Forex growth plan rules the day. All right, folks, that's it from me. Thanks for your time. We'll talk again soon. Thanks for tuning in to the Urban Property Investor. To never miss an episode, make sure you subscribe to the podcast on your favorite app or on YouTube. I would love it if you could give the show a rating and share it with your friends and family. In between episodes, you can always keep in touch with me by connecting on social media over Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn. Until we meet again on the next episode of the Urban Property Investor, take care and bye for now.